Alright guys, there we are again, new video tutorial on Unity ECS stuff. First of all, thanks everyone for watching. Hope you had a great start into the new year. One of my newest resolutions was to do more videos. Now that hasn't worked out for the first 2 weeks. Let's hope I can get better at that in the future. But honestly, it's just always hard to come up with stuff for videos because I'm still learning myself, and if I find out some interesting stuff, I'm gonna let you know. Now, what do we have in the store for this video? Well, I've been playing around a bit more with Unity's ECS stuff, and have been looking into multiple things, but the first thing I want to show you today is how to use a hybrid approach. Now, what does that even mean, hybrid? Now, as you might or might not know, ECS currently is something that is developed pretty much independently from Unity's core functionality. ECS worlds run separately and are not connected to game objects and components that are used in game objects. What this means is that you can't really access game objects directly from ECS unless you use some special features that Unity added to ECS to bridge that gap. Now, why is that important? Some features just aren't there yet in ECS. Actually, a lot of features aren't there that in ECS yet. ECS is pretty bare bones right now. For example, and this is what we're going to look into, when you want to use animations, you can't really do that in the pure ECS. Now, first of all, some things that we need to keep in mind when using a hybrid ECS approach. Now, hybrid ECS means that you have to somehow use mono behaviors to access your entities in the ECS and update those entities, and vice versa. You can, in the system, access mono behavior components, but the only limitation is that you can't do that in jobs. So you can't run jobified systems that access mono behavior components, like the animator, for example. Now, the example that I made up for this is using animations. As you can see, I downloaded this character from Mixamo, and currently it's not animated, but when I left click, it runs this wave animation. How does this work? Well, let's go through it step by step. Now, first of all, how do we set up the scene? You see, there's a character, there's some environmental stuff that isn't really important. The main focus is this character, and this character has normal components. It has the transform, it has an animator, but it also has a custom script, which is this input script, which is a mono behavior, which is used to handle the input, and it has this game object entity. Now, this game object entity is mono behavior that bridges the gap between game objects and entities. Now, the way this works is that this game object entity script takes all components into this from this game object and creates an entity from those. As you can see down here in our entity debugger, currently we are not running anything, but we already have one entity, and this is our character here, our Orisa. You have the animator, you have an input, and you have transform, and you have the entity, which is a little bit weird, but this is actually the this reference, I believe. Not 100% sure. It's also not super important. So, how does this stuff work? As you can see, we have this input, and that's the first script we're going to look into. It's this little mono behavior, and this is really a simple mono behavior. Now, this code isn't optimized at all, so just be wary. Um, in this code, I'm looking for the input, looking for the get mouse button down, so this is our left click. In this, when the left click is pressed, we get our entity. We do this by accessing our game object entity, which is on our game object, and get the entity reference. We get our entity manager, which you can also get from the same component. Now, usually if you want to do this properly, you would cache this in a variable and don't access this multiple times. And then we can use the manager to add a component to our entity. In this case, we have a wave component. Now, what I did is I separated two kinds of logic. One kind would be animating a single. I called it a one-shot animation. So a one-shot animation is just an animation that only is triggered once and then it forgets about it. As you can see, if I click in this window, it only runs the animation once and then it stops. Alright. So, how do we do that? First of all, to play the animation, we have this one-shot animation system. Now, it's super funky. It's not really something that you would write this way when you would write a game, but this is just I just did this for testing purposes. Now, one big issue that currently exists in ECS is that you can't have strings on your components. Now, why is that? Because a string is a reference type, and Unity doesn't want reference types on components. Now, usually what I would do is add a string here, like, I don't know, animation state or something like that, right? Make it public. And then you would set the animation state in this component. And then the one-shot animation system could use this to set the animation state to the state that you write it. Now, since string is a reference type, we can't do that. That's probably currently a limitation, and there is no proper fix for that, I would say. There are workarounds, but yeah, I won't go into that. It's just what it is. ECS is currently in development, and if they come up with a proper solution for that problem, I will let you guys know. Now, that's one reason why I wrote this stuff a little bit wonky, because I actually wanted to do it this way, and then I found out the hard way. Well, not gonna happen. That's why, we have in this wave system currently, no, not in the wave system, I'm sorry, in the one-shot animation system, we currently have this static animation name, which, to be honest, makes the whole separation of stuff a little bit redundant, because it can't really do much, but yeah, it's still a good practice. Now, let's knowing that, we can go through all our stuff. So in this input, we add a wave component. Now, the wave component is just a flag component. It doesn't have any content, right? So it's just a, hey, I'm here, do something. Now, in the wave system, we do look for our wave components, and then we look into our wave components and add a one-shot animation component to that same entity, and then remove the wave component. Now, this is where I would usually just set a animation name, but as we all know, this doesn't work. Now, if you remember the last tutorial I made about ECS, you might recognize some slightly difference between the way I create groups in ECS. The reason for that being is that Unity pretty much announced at the last Unite that they're going to deprecate the inject method to do stuff. Now I believe this old system, which is now commented out, has an example of how this stuff works. Right, you have or how it used to work. It still works this way, but this is, as far as I know, this method is no longer recommended. It will probably be removed at one point. So yeah, that's not how we're going to do that. Now, looking at this example, we have this create group, right? And we have all the stuff. We have the entities. We have this legs property, and long story short, we won't need it in the future. If you look at the same system updated for the new method, we can see we have this onCreateManager method, and in this onCreateManager method we create our groups by calling the getComponentGroup method, and using component type read only or component type subtractive or component type, I believe, create. We can define our component group, and as you can see, this is much less code than it was before using inject. Now, looking at the wave component system, you can see we have this one component that we're looking into, and then we can call get entity array on our group, and using that we can now iterate over this using a for loop with create entities lengths, etc. Now you can also get component arrays. I'm not sure if I used that. Yeah, I used that here. So yeah, let's just look into that. Now, as you can see, this adds a one-shot animation, and then we get into this one-shot animation system. We have a component group that uses one-shot animation group and the animator. Now, as you'll know, the animator is a mono behavior or old component, or however you want to call this, and we have our own one-shot animation. Now, we want to iterate over our entities, but we also want to iterate over our animators because we want to access the animators. So we get this entity array and we get this component array to iterate over the animator component. Now, for every animation entity component type that we want to use, we will need our own component array. So if you wanted to access the one-shot animation component, you would have to get a component array. The reason for that being, as we all know, Unity arranges the data in a way that we can iterate easily and fast over it, and that we don't have a lot of cache misses, and that is why we have to access each component type as its own array. Alright. Now, going back to our code, we iterate over all our entities. We access the animator by storing it in a temporary variable, and then we call animator play, which is the same what you would do in a mono behavior. So nothing changed here. And then we remove our one-shot animation component. And that pretty much already is it. Now, in order for this stuff to work, you need to be sure to have a animation controller set up that has the state that you want to call. Right? We currently have no transition back from wave to anything else. That's why it just stops at the end of the animation. So, yeah. That's why it doesn't go back to the T-pose. Alright, so this should be it. So let's do a quick recap. We have this input system that uses the game object entity to access the entity using the entity property on the game object entity, and this is pretty much how we access an entity from a mono behavior. And then from there on, we can just write our normal ECS code. Now this system, since it uses these mono behavior type components, I believe it is not possible to jobify this. But I could be wrong. I would have to try out stuff, to try out that kind of stuff. And yeah, that's going to be it for now. As I said, New Year's, God damn it, words are hard today. A New Year's resolution is to do more videos. I'm hoping to do, let's say, at least one every 2 weeks. That would be nice. Now, as you might have noticed, I also have dabbled into live streaming. I'm currently in the process of starting a new game project using ECS. And I'm also planning to live stream a bunch of that, so make sure to have your notifications enabled on the channel to see all that stuff. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it useful. As always, if you have questions or suggestions, just leave a comment, and I will see you the next time. Bye bye.